My name is Sierra Langford. I'm 33 years old, and for the last 6 years I've built a healthcare technology company from the ground up, quietly, deliberately, and entirely out of the spotlight my family never offered me. Tonight I sat at my brother's engagement dinner. Another polished, pristine affair designed to showcase his achievements to the world. The Langfords are a family of prestige, of predictable excellence. My brother Camden is a doctor. My parents are both Ivy League professionals. Me, I was the misstep. They rarely mentioned, the one they gently pied, sometimes ignored. That is until Camden's fiancée Harper tilted her head across the table and said, "Wait, Langford, you're Sierra Langford, are you the founder of Medivival?" The room fell silent. Forks hovered midair, my mother blinked twice. My father stared at me like he'd never seen me before, and I just smiled because that moment, that recognition was never the goal, but it was the turning point. Growing up in a home like mine meant success was never optional. It was expected, outlined, and enforced like law. My father, Dr. Graham Langford, was a top cardiothoracic surgeon in Boston. My mother, Alina, was the kind of attorney who made junior partners shake in their heels. And then there was Camden, the golden child, the perfect son, the one who followed every rule and earned every spotlight. Dinner conversations weren't really conversations, they were performance reviews. Camden would discuss a successful rotation, a published paper, or a patient's recovery story. My parents would nod, beam, applaud, then their eyes would shift to me with restrained politeness. "And you, Sierra, I taught myself how to code in Python this week." I'd offer, heart-pounding, "That's cute," my mother would reply, not looking up from her wine. "But you really should refocus on pre-law, that's more practical." What they called practical, I called confining. What they called success, I called suffocating. There was no space in that house for passion only plans, only paths already carved and stamped with prestige. By 16, I had already built a basic hospital scheduling app that ended up being used for a school fundraiser. The event coordinator told my parents I had a real gift. My mom smiled tightly and said, "Yes, but we're hoping she'll choose something sustainable, like law or administration." That word sustainable, as if ambition outside their blueprint was inherently fragile. I remember once slipping a print out of my code under my dad's newspaper at breakfast, hoping he'd ask about it. He didn't even glance at it, just pushed it aside to reach his coffee. The silence hurt more than if he'd laughed. By the time Camden got into med school, they threw a huge party. I had qualified for the state tech finals that same week. My mother said, "Maybe next time, sweetie. We've already planned everything for your brother." I went anyway alone, and I won first place. When I came home carrying my trophy, no one asked how it went. They were too busy congratulating Camden on getting into Johns Hopkins. I left it in my closet, a private reminder of who I was becoming, even if no one saw it. That night I made a vow. I wouldn't fight for their attention. I'd outgrow their approval quietly, completely. And one day I would build something so undeniable it would speak for itself. College was my first taste of oxygen. I chose a small but rigorous tech school far from Boston where no one knew the Langford name. There I wasn't Camden's sister, I was just Sierra, the girl who saw code the way others saw language. In my sophomore year I met Maya Sterling. She was sharp, relentlessly curious, and just as disillusioned with traditional paths as I was. We'd stay up until 2 a.m. tweaking code, not for grades, but because we believed in what we were building. There was an ease between us, the kind that happens when two people recognize each other without needing to explain the why. Metaverse started as a simple idea sketched on a napkin. Secure, intuitive system to bridge the disastrous communication gaps in healthcare. Maya had lost her uncle to a medication error. I had watched my own grandmother be misdiagnosed 3 times in a row. We knew the system was broken. We believed we could fix a small part of it. While other students were lining up internships, we were building a prototype in Maya's garage, surviving on takeout and borrowed Wi-Fi. Her parents encouraged us every step of the way, brought us snacks, asked about progress, even offered to help us file our LLC papers. Meanwhile, my parents still thought I was freelancing in it. I let them believe that it was easier than hearing another lecture about real jobs and backup plans. Every time I tried to explain what we were building, the glazed look in their eyes shut me down faster than any outright criticism could have. By senior year, we'd won a statewide entrepreneurship competition. The prize money helped us incorporate, and a professor connected us to our first hospital client, an administrator named Dr. Simon Kwan, who saw what we saw: potential. That first contract changed everything. We moved into a cramped apartment in the South Loop of Chicago and worked 18-hour days. I still remember the week we couldn't pay rent, so we offered to build our landlord's website in exchange for a month's grace. He agreed. Bit by bit, Medivault grew. We pitched to angel investors. We hired Tyler, a genius back-end developer who had dropped out of MIT. We landed a regional healthcare provider then. Another, each win was quiet, contained within our tiny circle. And each one brought a flicker of disbelief that we were actually doing it, actually building something that mattered. I never told my family, not even when we hit a 100,000 users, not when we raised our first $3 million. They never asked. Camden was now a chief resident. My parents' Christmas letters still called me between roles or doing something tech-adjacent. I let them. It wasn't about spite. It was self-P protection. I didn't want them near. Something so sacred, not when they had spent years calling it insignificant, but success, even in silence, has a way of echoing. By the time I turned 30, Metavow was valued at over $80 million. Our software was in over 120 hospitals. We had a full team, an actual HR department, and a waiting list of clients. Maya and I had declined 3 acquisition offers already. We weren't done yet. Then one morning, Harper Carroll's name landed in my inbox. She was Horizon Health Tech's director of strategic acquisitions. Her message was courteous and probing, clearly testing the waters. She asked for a meeting regarding a potential strategic fit between our missions. I read the email 3 times, then I Googled her, and that's when I saw it. Harper Carroll Dirty was Camden's fiancée. I didn't tell anyone, not Maya, not Jules, not even my therapist. For a full week I just sat with the knowledge. The woman my brother was going to marry was the same executive trying to buy my company. Harper hadn't made the connection yet, of course. I kept a deliberately low profile, no photos and press releases, only my first name in articles. Inside tech circles I'd become something of a myth, the ghost founder who built Metavow but never sought the spotlight. But if Harper kept digging, she'd find me. And with the engagement dinner looming, the question shifted from if to when. My mother called 3 times that week. Make sure you dress appropriately. Harper's family is accomplished. We want to present. Well, translation, don't embarrass us with your usual too practical outfits. Of course I said I'll find something elegant. I chose a fitted black dress. Minimal, tasteful, powerful, not to prove anything, just to feel grounded. I didn't need to wear armor, I was the armor now. The restaurant was a glass and marble cathedral overlooking the river. Blue Bridge, the new Michelin darling in downtown Chicago. I arrived precisely on time, not early enough to help with seating charts. Not late enough to make a statement, just there. Camden greeted me with his usual easy charm. Liv, glad you made it. He introduced me to Harper, and for a moment I wondered if she'd see it. She didn't, not yet. Harper was warm and polished. Exactly the kind of woman my mother had always wanted me to befriend. Educated, poised, wearing power like perfume. I shook her hand and congratulated her. She smiled, gracious and unsuspecting. Dinner began with champagne and scripted toasts. My father beamed while praising Camden's latest publication in the Journal of Neurology. My mother choked up, recalling his first science fair ribbon. No one mentioned me. I was seated next to a cousin who asked if I was still between jobs. I'm in healthcare tech, I replied. Oh, like an app, she said, brows raised in mock interest, something like that. Between courses, my uncle leaned across the table. Camden mentioned you might have a shot at something at Apple. Entry level but solid, I nodded politely. That won't be necessary. From across the table I saw Harper looking at me, really looking, the way someone flips through mental files trying to place a face. Her brow furrowed, her head tilted. Sierra Langford, she said aloud. Wait, your last name is Langford? Camden chuckled. Of course, she's my sister. Harper set her fork down slowly. You're Sierra Langford of Metavow. The air snapped still. Even the wait staff seemed to pause. I am, I said evenly. You're the founder of Metavow. My mother looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. My father's wine glass halted midair. Harper turned to Camden, stunned. You didn't tell me your sister founded Metavow, the company we're about to acquire. Camden blinked. I what? Sierra, no, there must be some mistake. My sister works in tech support. No, Harper said firmly, eyes on me now. Your sister is the co-founder and CEO of the most revolutionary healthcare communications platform on the market. We've been negotiating with her company for the past 6 weeks at a valuation of over $200 million. The silence was suffocating. Then one by one the heads at the table swiveled to me. My mother's hand gripped her necklace. My father looked suddenly old. Camden just stared. Is that true? He whispered. Yes, I replied. We started Metavow in a garage. Now we serve over 300 hospitals across the country. No one spoke, not even Harper, who now wore a half-apologetic, half-odd expression. The rest of dinner was a blur. My relatives, who had barely asked how I was, now leaned in to ask if I had investing tips. My mother mentioned 3 times that she always knew I had a spark with computers. My father claimed he told colleagues about my startup years ago. I didn't correct them. I didn't need to. Camden was the only one who stayed mostly silent, still absorbing, still rewriting everything he thought he knew about his little sister. At one point he reached for his wine, missed the glass and just sat there, fingers resting on the tablecloth like he'd forgotten how to move. After dessert, Harper pulled me aside near the windows. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "I didn't mean to put you on the spot." I shook my head. "You didn't, that moment was inevitable." "Well, for what it's worth," she added, "your platform has saved lives, our analysts can't stop talking about it, and now I understand why your team is so protective. You built something real." I studied her face. This woman who might one day become my sister-in-law and more about my work than my own parents ever had. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. That night I walked to my car without looking back. For years I had dreamed of them finally seeing me. Now they had, and I realized it didn't change a thing. I had already become everything I needed to be long before they ever noticed. The morning after the dinner, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. My mother's text was first: "We need to talk. Brunch tomorrow." Drake Hotel, 11 a.m. Then came my father's. "Proud of you, let's catch up." Camden's came hours later. Much simpler. "Why didn't you tell me?" I stared at that one the longest. I hadn't told them because I didn't want to need their validation, and because I hadn't been sure what would hurt more, being dismissed or being claimed only after I'd already made it. But I agreed to brunch. Some things finally needed to be said out loud. They were already seated when I arrived at the Drake, both dressed like they were client meeting, my mother in pearls and a silk blouse, my father in his most formal weekend blazer, as if my success now required them to treat me like a peer instead of a daughter. "Sierra," my father said, rising halfway into an awkward, unfamiliar hug. "You look well." My mother didn't wait. "Darling, I've been reading everything. The innovation awards, the funding rounds, the user growth. It's remarkable." She paused. "But why didn't you share any of it with us?" I folded the napkin across my lap. "Because the last time I tried, you told me to apply for a job answering phones." "That's not fair," my father said quickly, his tone suddenly defensive. "We were trying to help." "No," I said, meeting his gaze. "You were trying to fix something that wasn't broken." My mother's face stiffened. "We just didn't understand, Sierra. The tech world moves so fast, it felt unstable. And medicine doesn't," I countered gently. "Law doesn't, that's different. Those are structured," she said, struggling. "I know," I nodded. "That's what scared you. I chose something you couldn't control." My father sighed. "But you're clearly brilliant. We always knew that. You knew what you wanted me to be." I corrected. "That's not the same." The waiter brought coffee, offering a momentary reprieve. I stirred in cream, trying not to let the heat in my chest rise into my throat. "I spent years building something I loved," I said once he walked away. "And every time I tried to tell you, it felt like screaming into a storm. So eventually I stopped trying." "We thought you were lost," my mother whispered. "I wasn't, I just wasn't yours to direct anymore." The silence between us felt fragile, like glass stretched too thin, but it held. "We love you," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "But love without respect doesn't feel like love." For a moment my father looked genuinely uncertain, like a man who'd spent his whole life being right, and was for the first time afraid he might have been wrong. The rest of brunch passed with less posturing, more pauses, fewer assumptions. They asked real questions about Maya, about our first office, about the early hospital contracts. My mother even admitted she'd tried reading a blog on startup culture, but didn't understand most of the acronyms. It was the most vulnerable I'd seen her in years. "We never meant to make you feel small," my father said near the end. "You didn't mean to," I said, "but you did. That's the part I've had to work through." He nodded slowly. "I'm glad you worked through it. Even if it wasn't with us." When we left the restaurant, there were no hugs, no sudden declarations of redemption, just a plan to have dinner again next week. It was a start. A few nights later, Camden showed up at my apartment with a bottle of Cabernet and a bakery box. "I tried baking," he said sheepishly. "It went badly, so I bought backups." I smiled. "Classic you." We sat on the floor, backs against the couch like we had as kids, watching the Chicago skyline shimmer outside my window. "I need to say this," he began, no preamble. "I'm sorry." I looked over, surprised by the directness. "I believed what Mom and Dad believed, that you were floundering, that you'd missed your shot." He shook his head. "But you weren't lost. You were building something they didn't understand. I never asked, and that's on me." "You weren't the only one," I said, "but you're the only one here right now." He raised his glass to the black sheep. I clinkecked mine against his to the sheep that built an empire. We laughed, the sound echoing softly in the quiet apartment. That moment mattered more to me than any article, any valuation, any closed deal, because he wasn't just proud. He saw me. 6 months later, the world had changed, but not in the way I once fantasized. Yes, the Horizon deal closed. Metavar became part of one of the largest healthcare tech portfolios in the world. Maya took over global strategy. I accepted the role of head of innovation, working with Horizon's top leaders to scale our platform across continents. My office now overlooked the Chicago River, glass walls framing a skyline that used to feel unreachable. But that wasn't the real transformation. The real change was quieter. It was my mother texting me a screenshot of an article about women in tech and asking, "Have you met her? She reminds me of you." It was my father sitting through a full product demo and nodding. Not because he understood every detail, but because he finally knew it. Mattered, it was Camden mentioning in passing that he quoted one of my white papers during grand rounds. And it was me, no longer shrinking, hosting monthly mentorship dinners for young women in STEM, reminding them that even when no one claps, their work still counts. One afternoon, a high school student I mentored asked me, "Do you ever wish they had believed in you sooner?" I thought about that sometimes. I admitted it would have made things easier, but it might have made me softer too. She nodded, not entirely sure what I meant, so I added, "There's power in building alone. It forces you to believe in yourself before anyone else does, and once you have that, no one can take it from you." I still think about that often because it's the truth I didn't know I was chasing all along. Recognition is sweet, but it fades. Conviction, that stays. That night, as I stood by the window of my office watching the city flicker alive below, I smiled, not because they finally saw me, but because I never needed them to. Not really, because real success isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right and living like you believe. If you enjoyed the story, hit like and subscribe for more story. Share this story. You are not alone. God bless you. Thanks for watching.